They loved each other and had since they met in high school. For Jane, Bob was her first and only boyfriend, and she knew she wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. There was no doubt in her mind. He was the one for her. So, at the age of only 19, they got hitched, as their friends called it. They tied the knot, took the plunge, bought the cow. It wasn't a big wedding, but it was just the way they wanted it to be. A small ceremony on the beach, with their toes dug deep in the white Florida sand, and the wind so strong in Jane's hair that she had to hold her veil so it wouldn't fly away. For their honeymoon, they went to Disney World and stayed 2 nights at the Disney Resort. It was a wedding present from Bob's mother, who couldn't afford much but had saved up to be able to give it to them. Jane had never been happier in her life. Even though she grew up in Central Florida, she had never been to Disney World. Since her mom was a single mother to her and her brother, she could never afford to take her there or anywhere else that cost money, despite working 2 jobs. Once the honeymoon was over, they moved to Cocoa Beach. Bob had gotten a job at a roofing company, and the 2 of them moved into a 1-bedroom condo only steps from the beach. Meanwhile, Jane got a job at Ron John's, the world's largest surf shop, in the swimsuit department. Everything was coming together for the young couple quickly. Bob adored her and worshipped the ground that Jane walked on. He surprised her by coming to her work and taking her out for lunch. He showered her with presents, flowers, and sometimes even chocolate. He would have the flowers sent to her job to brighten up her day. She loved that he did that, even though her coworker one day said she thought he only did it to piss on his territory and make sure everyone knew she was taken. Jane understood that her coworker obviously was just jealous because she and Bob had such a great marriage. Why else would she say such a silly thing? "Bob is just kind and very generous," Jane replied, and held the flowers in her hands. "Tell me, when is the last time you did anything with anyone else but him?" the coworker then asked. "What do you mean?" Jane asked. "When was the last time you went out with friends?" I don't really have many friends." The coworker gave her a look that made Jane feel very uncomfortable. She had a lump in her throat and hurried into the back, still holding the flowers. She found a vase for them and smelled them, annoyed at her coworker for saying such a stupid thing and ruining the gift for her. It was true what they said. Jealousy really was such an ugly green monster. Jane then decided to be careful not to let people like her coworker get between her and her happiness. She couldn't let this get to her the way it had. Yet, later in the day, when another coworker, Tim, asked if she would go out for lunch with him and a couple of others, Jane said yes, even though she usually would have said no. Chapter 3. May, 2018. For 8-year-old Alicia Porter, going to school had stopped being fun the day that her best friend Alondra had ditched her for Tanya Reynolds. Up until then, Alondra and Alicia had been inseparable. Ever since kindergarten. They would always hang together at recess and play their wolf game, where they pretended to be half wolves in a pack. They would sit next to one another on the bus on the way home, and even often play after school since they lived so close together. But 2 weeks ago, Tanya had stolen Alondra from Alicia since her best friend Samantha had ditched her for Mercedes, the new girl in their class. Alicia used to love school, but since that happened, she always felt so alone on the playground, and even in the classroom since she no longer had a best friend to hang out with. Today was no different. At lunch, she had walked up to Alondra and asked if she could sit with her, but Alondra had just looked at her, then turned around and talked to Tanya instead. Alicia had sat down anyway, but all during lunch break, Alondra had kept her back turned to her, so she couldn't even see her face. Then, she and Tanya took a selfie with Alondra's new phone. Alondra was the first one.